Yep. I would like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press in attendance and those who are watching the live stream of this meeting via YouTube. Whilst this meeting is being held publicly in a COVID-19 secure manner, it is also being streamed via YouTube. Minutes of the meeting will be produced in the usual way, and a recording of the meeting will be available to view on YouTube until such time that the minutes are produced. Please be aware that only audio from the microphones will be captured on the live stream. Therefore, those invited to speak need to ensure their microphones are on when speaking and are as close to the member as possible. To ensure the meeting to run in an orderly manner, can all present keep their microphones off except when invited to speak? Please ensure that the microphone is turned off when you have finished speaking. I would also like to remind members to make sure their mobile phones are on silent or turned off for the duration of the meeting. Please be aware that the cameras will be on at all times during the meeting. There is always a risk that we may run into technical problems, and I would ask for your patience if we do. Should this occur, an adjournment will be declared until the fault is addressed and the public broadcast will be paused. Agenda item number 1 is apologies for absence. Member Services, can you please report?
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Meekins, Councillor Purser and Councillor Tierney.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2 is to confirm the previous minutes held on the 14th of February 2022. Do I have a proposer to approve these minutes, please? Councillor Moran-Davis. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Wicks, thank you. Do any members have any comments or amendments to make to these minutes? Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for not being here last month. Unfortunately, I got COVID, like many of us.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah. I did read with interest the points that Councillor Benny made regarding fraud with the COVID grants. And I think the statement that comes across is that there was no fraud. I think it's probably better to say that there was no cases of fraud identified, probably be more accurate. But given the large scale fraud that's been announced nationally by the government, I am surprised we've never found any cases. I do recognise the comments about the fact that actually, we were quite stringent in sort of looking at the applications. So, do we have an idea of how many applications we rejected as a sort of, as an idea? Because would that give us an indication about, how we've managed to avoid the fraud compared to competitor councils that obviously had different setup and fraud might have occurred?
I think that's something that we could bring back to the committee if they're prepared to accept that at the next meeting, or I can email out the committee to provide that information.
Thank you. That'll be useful, I think, and it will give us some context for what's happening locally in Fenland. I can't believe there's no fraud happening. It's just obviously we've not detected it. I think is the key point.
Yeah. Councillor Mrs. French.
Yes, I did attend a meeting of the RP. I think it was a fortnight ago, and certainly we have got no cases at this time. The ARP are certainly, keeping an eye on that.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything to add? Can I now have a show of hands to approve these minutes? Thank you, members. Therefore, the minutes are approved from the meeting on the 14th of February. Agenda item number 3, to report any additional items for consideration which the chairman deems urgent by virtue of special circumstances to now be specified. I believe there are none today. Agenda item number 4, declaration of interest under the local code of conduct in respect of any items to be discussed at this meeting. If you have anything to declare, please raise your hand. No, thank you, members. Agenda item number 5, risk-based internal audit plan for 2022-2023. I now call upon Cathy, Internal Audit Manager, to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. So agenda item 5 on page 9 of your agenda packs lists the internal audit plan for 2022-23. This plan that we bring to you today obviously highlights all of the work and directs the work of the internal audit team for the next year. As previously stated in other reports, we have successfully recruited to the internal audit team, and my role is now returned to full-time. So this year's plan includes an additional 54 audit days. I think that's really important to note, because considering the challenges we've faced over the last 2 years, this gives us an opportunity to try and recoup some of those audit days that we lost during the pandemic while we were all off. So I think it's really important to note that we have an extra 54 days in this year's plan, which obviously we will be utilising to deliver a successful audit plan. The plan is risk-based, and section 3 on page 13 of the report details how we determine the level of risk for our audits. One thing to note, this year we have no low risk audits in the plan, because we feel it's important to get ourselves back on track with some of the medium higher risk, higher profiled audits that we need to have some assurances on. So Appendix A of the report on page 18 lists all of those audits. Some things to note: we have a few new audits in the plan this year, in addition to those of medium and high risk. The new audits are public health funerals. This is something that we've never audited as a specific separate item before in any audit plan. It's been touched upon throughout cemeteries audits in the past, but we felt it was important to pull it out to do a specific audit on that area. Freedom of information requests is also a new area. Again, this has been pulled out where it had been combined previously. Again, there are some certain concerns, I think, and particularly I picked up at overview and scrutiny as well, areas around freedom of information requests and complaints that I think it's important that we cover off from an audit point of view as well. So we can feed that back not only to this committee, but also to overview and scrutiny. My Fenland is a new audit area as well. I think you'll appreciate My Fenland's now been in place for approximately 12 months, so we think it's a good time now. We've merged some other audits which were around customer services and the contact centre. And again, something overview and scrutiny picking up as well is the contact centre and the level of calls, so that will be picked up with the My Fenland audit. And we are still working on post-payment assurance for business grants, which hopefully, Councillor Booth, this will include some of the work and some of the comments that you've made as well, and we'll be able to bring that back. We're also including this year the Water Management Alliance audit, which is the first external audit we are delivering for a paid service. So I'm being paid for that work, or we are being paid for that work to deliver that audit, which will bring in some additional revenue to the council as well. So I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any on the audit plan for next year.
Thank you, Cathy. Can I have a proposer for this report? Councillor Mrs French, seconder. Councillor Mockett, thank you. Did you want to speak on that?
Yes, Cathy, interesting to see that you're going to get some revenue in. Can you tell us roughly how much?
Yes, we're doing 7 days work, which will bring in just under £3,000.
Okay, that's a good start.
Councillor Wicks.
It's in the manner of some clarification on the timelines between audits, and I look towards the economy and the delivery process, the contract monitoring, highways, which I find interested. What are the highways that we're auditing on that part? But it is about the actual cycle of the audits, because development process, we're looking at, what's that, nearly 7 years behind, or since the last audit, which seems a little excessive to put a point on it.
So your first point, contract monitoring highways. So this is looking at our engineers team and the work they do with the county on highways. It also includes some work around street lighting as well. So that's an audit that we have a scope that we'll be looking at on that area. Development delivery processes, yes, 2015-16, when it was last audited, is too long in my opinion. It was one that we did have to put back. It should have been looked at in 1920, no, 2021, which would have been 5 years, because we do try to make sure that we look at everything within a 5-year period. But obviously with the pandemic, we did have to put quite a few things back. And unfortunately, that was one of the areas. One thing that we do try and do is ensure that we're covering off areas. So there would have been other development service audits going on there where we would have asked the question if there was anything specific that was falling behind that we could have looked at that time. So this hopefully will pick up any of those areas. And like I say, we're trying to get ourselves back on track now. So there shouldn't be any more 15, 16 audits crop up in any plans moving forwards.
Thank you very much for that.
Councillor Mrs French.
Yeah, thanks, Cathy. With regard to the highway audit, obviously most of this is County Council, which I'm very interested to see what you come up with as I sit on the Highways and Transport at County. And with the street lights, bearing in mind County own the majority of street lights, but we own some. So are you doing an audit on both Fenland lights and County, or one or the other?
It'll be primarily focused on our contractual arrangements with County and with our delivery on the lights. It's very difficult for me to give you an exact answer now because we haven't written all of the scopes yet. But certainly when we bring the results back to the committee, I can highlight in a bit more detail. And if you have any specific concerns, then please just let me know and we can look to incorporate any of those areas within the audit.
When it comes to highways, yeah, I will have a look.
Councillor Hewlett.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you clarify for me, please, what substantial, adequate and limited mean?
So we have 5 levels of audit results, assurance levels that we provide. So the first level is full assurance. That's something that I will very, very, very rarely ever give an opinion of full assurance, because I think it's quite dangerous to tell a service area that everything's perfect, because there's always room for improvement. So substantial will be the next level down. I do have a list of definitions that I can circulate to the committee. So substantial is there are no major weaknesses and only minor weaknesses are identified that are considered best practice. Adequate assurance is there are some weaknesses identified, but nothing that puts major system objectives at risk. The next area down is limited, and that is we have identified some major weaknesses that could put system objectives at risk. And then the final level is no assurance, which is catastrophic failure of service delivery.
Thank you for that. And where do we see the corrective action for this? What you've highlighted as being addressed?
So when we bring the progress reports to committee, so whenever we complete an audit, we issue the audit with its assurance rating. We also issue a number of recommendations and the categorization of those recommendations. So some are high, some will be medium, some will be low. That's then a management action plan is then derived from that recommendation plan, and management team will then action those recommendations within a given time frame and agreed time period. And then I will then bring progress reports to the committee. So I bring quarterly reports to this committee, which list all of the audits we've done, the recommendations and the numbers of, and we will be bringing this year outstanding actions as well back to the committee so that you can see where we are in terms of completing those recommendations.
Thank you for that. So this committee sees the start, what the action is, how it's finished. Thanks very much.
Councillor Booth.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to pick up on that last point. It's something I've been highlighting for some time about getting more visibility of what the reports deliver, and I think my suggestion is if we could get executive summaries of the reviews or something like that, that would, I feel, be appropriate, because although yes, you do provide us with those details, I think it's at such a high level sometimes we don't really get the full picture of what's happening. So yeah, you've said that's something you're going to do this year. Is that sort of along the lines of what you're envisaging?
So at the last committee meeting, which unfortunately you weren't present for, I have expanded some of the work that's in the appendix that you see to give a little bit more detail in that. I wouldn't say it goes as far as executive summary level. So again, it's something that we can consider and bring to the committee. The additional work I was intending to bring to the committee is around the completion of those outstanding actions, so more statistical information as well, in addition to what we already have in there. Executive summaries, that's certainly something we can discuss and see if we can bring a bit more detail back to the committee, if that would support your.
Yeah, I think that'd be useful, Chair. In my previous roles, I mean, to be honest, you probably actually get reports sent round to like the members of the audit, or effectively the audit committee in different like commercial organisations. So yeah, they've got the ability to see it, but the executive summary is probably the key point, because it will obviously just draw out, you know, what the main issues are, or what the main findings are. So I still feel that that would be useful, particularly if we are going to perform our role of being, you know, the critical friend, as it were, because I feel at the moment we're probably a bit too far detached from what's actually happening.
Councillor Mockett.
Is it possible if we asked, for example, contract monitoring, grounds maintenance, could we see what you actually plan to audit and how?
What we plan to audit and how? I mean, something that I have been thinking about, which in the pipeline, is potentially delivering a training session to the audit committee on how we deliver an audit. And I wonder if that might be useful.
It's more, what are you auditing and how? So when you go to audit your contracts management, say grounds maintenance, you must have a schedule of what you're looking for, where you're going to spend more time, less time. You must have a plan of how you're going to audit them.
So what we tend to do, we liaise with the service managers initially. Obviously, we have our own documents. We have system control evaluations. We come up with objectives and things that we are looking to audit and things we're looking to find. We have a fraud risk register that we use internally, which covers off some areas. We'll always look at specific areas, I think, as highlighted in section 3 around materiality, turnover, those sorts of areas, to determine how high profile an audit the area is. And we also do quite a lot of networking with other audit organisations as well to determine that audit plan. I mean, again, if there's a specific audit, I mean, grounds maintenance you mentioned there, I mean, grounds maintenance with the contract, yes, I mean, compliance with the contract is obviously a big issue. We know in the past there have been some weaknesses that we've identified. So our starting point is always the previous audit to ensure that they have addressed some of the weaknesses that we identified at that point. Again, by all means, if you want to give me a call or to drop me an email, then we can go through some of those more specifics.
Yeah, I'll do that, thanks.
Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, one way to achieve, I think, what Councillor Mockett's sort of saying is to circulate the terms of references, but as we're not quite there with the executive summaries, but the terms of reference would essentially highlight, you know, what areas you're going to look at in the review, and you know how long you're going to spend in it. It's not effectively the audit plan per se, but it will give us a good idea of particularly the areas. Again, maybe some for future consideration. I know that obviously you go through and develop those terms of references with the senior management team, but again, it's something we don't have sight of. So probably our only opportunity to raise areas of concern is actually this meeting when we look at the audit plan. Yeah, we can raise other issues throughout the year, but it's the focus today, I guess, is when we look at what the audits are going to be covering.
Yeah, both of those areas, they're certainly something I'll consider. We'll have discussion and bring some information back. I mean, if anybody has any concerns, I mean, one thing I will say is, you know, contact me at any point about any service area. That goes for any member, any ward, anything. If anybody has concerns, you know, I am the audit manager and I will look at concerns that people have. But certainly these two areas are things that I will pick up and we'll see if we can't provide you with more assurance, because that is what your role is to deliver assurance to the taxpayer on the services that we deliver as a council.
Do you want to come in first, Peter?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. I think obviously there's a theme, and I think you're asking for more information. And I think that's absolutely really healthy. So I think what we need to do is take that offline and have a look. I don't think you need to see, it becomes very operational if you see every terms of reference for every audit. There's lots of them. But I do think it's probably worth bringing some examples. And obviously we want to have more We want you guys to have more visibility on the things we're finding as well, which we're attempting to do as well. So perhaps I can take an action away with Kathy to have a look at how we can keep this committee more informed on what is happening. So without bogging it down with loads and loads of operational things that you probably don't need to be involved in.
Councillor Benny.
Yeah, my question to Kathy was, you know, you're a professional woman, this is your job. How much detail does this committee need to know? Because for every report you write is time, which means you're not spending time doing the audit work. And that comes back slowly to what Peter is saying. You know, what does the committee do with that information when it gets it? It's the findings of that report that is the important thing. It must be done through a process and policy driven method to do that audit. And if that is working, that must be in line with other councils because of the way that it's structured. What are we going to do with that information? If all we are doing is burdening you with more work, that will affect something else further down the line. And I'm all for openness and all very much for seeing how you do your job. But as a committee, what are we going to do with that information when we've got it? It has to be a purpose to it, and just to give you more work for the sake of looking at it and going, oh yeah, that's really good. You know, we've got to take into consideration your time and the amount of work you've got to put to bring that to. I think, you know, a session on how you do the audits is beneficial to the whole committee. But all of this will take time, and time costs money, and something will give if that is. So how does that fit in with the amount of work this will take to rate these reports? Because I know Councillor Bowden has looked at reducing the size of reports for committees across the board because members don't read them, not fully, and you know, in some cases they don't. Maybe they do. I don't know. But you know, it has to be readable when you've got it. And if you bombard people with too much data, you lose the point of a bullet point and an answer, which is what you're already giving.
I think that's really useful comments. I think what we need to do, I mean, as Peter says, we need to take it offline and have a discussion around it. I think the training session, I think, would be useful and beneficial to you all, because what I need for you to be able to and be comfortable with as a committee is that you can take the assurance from me to provide the assurances that you are supposed to be doing as your role as a member of the audit committee. Time and resources, obviously, you know, we all know the pressures. We know that we have more days in this year's audit plan than we've ever had before, which is very useful. But like you say, I don't want to be spending all of those extra days writing reports that are not going to necessarily be read or digested and understood in the way that we need them to. So it's about striking that important balance between providing you as the committee with enough information to make sure that you are happy with the information that you're receiving. And I think it's going to be work in progress. And, you know, this dialogue that we have together as a committee, I think is really, really important. And, you know, we'll try something for the next meeting and we'll work and we'll build upon that until we hit the right level so that we feel that we've got that balance right.
Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, my suggestion wasn't that we write new reports, it was to use what we've got, you know, in the existing report and processes. So you normally do terms of reference anyway, so you produce that anyway, and you would normally produce, I'm assuming, an executive summary on your reports anyway. So this isn't going to entail extra work. Maybe the extra piece would be cutting those bits out, like the exec summary, and sending it round. But I can't imagine that would be overly burdensome, you know, because you've done the work anyway. So, and I think as an audit committee, we've got a crucial role to play, and we've got to take that seriously. And we need to have sight of stuff. But I do take on board about, you know, not creating extra work, but using what you're already producing to keep us informed.
Peter, did you want to comment?
I was just going to say, I think, Councillor Boo, this is kind of in line with what we were talking about for complaints and the overview and scrutiny. And it's about disseminating enough information so that you guys can make a judgment call, do your roles. So I think we'll take it offline. We want to share more. You're asking for more, but without creating an industry in itself is what we're saying. And I think a lot of the information is there anyway. So, and we do want to drive so that you can see if there are themes. That's the same sort of thing that we were looking at for complaints. So are there particular areas that we should be worried about? Are there themes to these complaints? Are there patterns to what Kathy's finding? So I think if you allow us to take it offline, and each meeting we'll bring back a little bit more until we get the balance right, because I think it is about getting the balance right, as you've said.
Councillor Wicks?
Yeah, my points are, having done contract management before, there are key things. One, value for money. Is it fulfilling the requirement that was initially set? And the should we say regular meetings between the actual manager of the contract and the contractor to enhance the process on a regular basis, so that failures are picked up quickly and rectified, but at the same time where the service is good, that is recognised by the council to the contractor. It is, you know, a 360 wheel that should have a set of procedures in place which will ensure that your job as an audit manager should be seamless, because the process is there to start with.
Yeah, so contract monitoring is an area that's quite different to some of our other operational audits that we do. And yes, we will always look at the governance arrangements in place around any contract, the performance of that contract, the monitoring of that contract, and whether or not we are achieving value for money and the stated objectives that we're set out to achieve. So yes, they're fundamental parts of any contract monitoring audit. And I think we've got 3 contract monitoring audits in this year that we're looking at. 2 contract monitoring audits, grounds maintenance, highways. So again, if you do have any specific queries in relation to those audits, then like I say, just drop me an email or a phone call and we can discuss those.
Thank you, members. Councillor Booth?
Thank you, Chair. Could I talk about a couple of specific items now as opposed to the more general process? So you talked about contract monitoring highways, and I think you've alluded to the fact that you're probably going to be looking at street lighting, and specifically the Fenland street lighting. One area I would like you to take on board is the SLAs in place. And I guess it's the value add. Are they fit for purpose? Do they need amending to improve the service? But maybe we could talk about that offline at some point. Then you've got the 3 Cs, so the customer care. So I'm assuming that's effectively the complaints handling process. I'm concerned you've only got like 6 days for that, because we know there are going to be some changes, particularly to the reporting that's been reported to overview and scrutiny. So I guess the question is, will you do any case sampling to see how complaints are being dealt with, to make sure that the process has been followed and the complaint has been dealt with appropriately?
Yes, so yes, your street lighting comment and the contract one, yeah, we'll take that offline. We'll have discussion around that. I'm aware it's something that you've alluded to in the past as well, which was why I mentioned that at the start, because I knew that would interest you. 3 Cs, yes, we have only got 6 days in the audit plan for that. Sampling, yes, we will do some case sampling on that. We will always look to do some days. I mean, one thing to note with this plan, it has to be flexible. It has to allow us to complete the work to a satisfactory and standard level. We do have some contingency days available. So if we get to the end of our 6 days and we haven't drawn satisfactory conclusions, then we will draw some days from our contingency to ensure that we can complete the work to a satisfactory standard. The same goes with anything within this plan. It is important to note it is flexible, operational, organisational needs. If something crops up that's, as we had with the pandemic, we've had to learn to be very flexible and adaptable with this plan. So this is obviously our guideline and what we intend to do. The number of days within the plan are based on previous days and the amount of time that we expect it to take. But if that needs to change, then we will change it as we go through the year.
I guess the point I've got particular experience in doing complaints handling, monitoring reviews, and I know that it can be quite a lengthy piece of work, particularly if you're doing case reviews. Albeit I used to work in a quite technical area, so they're probably not as complex as some of the review complaints I would have been dealing with. But yeah, I think to get an adequate sample, you need to get a good population across the board, and also do things such as trend analysis and the point I've been making to Peter Obian scrutiny about how we actually drive quality changes across the organisation and improve the service we're delivering. So that's just one point on that. And then the final point is just about the local authority trading company. 10 days, that feels a bit light for me. I think it's quite a risky area. A lot of members have expressed concern around, this new venture. You alluded to the fact you're gonna, your team's gonna need, extra training in this area because it is quite a specialist area. So, but I take on board your comments about flexibility and the ability to sort of add extra days where possible.
Yeah, and I think with the local authority trading company, one thing to note is this is an audit that is in the plan every single year. So it's not 10 days every 3 to 5 years, it's 10 days every single year that we are looking with the local authority trading company to try and give a bit of consistency and support to members around that particular area. I'm currently doing an audit now on the governance and the set of arrangements for that local authority trading company, which will be reported back in my year-end report to you. With regards to qualifications and training that the staff need, I have quite a lot of experience of dealing with local authority trading companies from some of the work that the shared internal audit manager role I did with King's Lynn, because they had a number of local authority trading companies. So I did build quite an in-depth knowledge of how that needs to, the areas that we need to focus on from an audit point of view. So hopefully that, and again, as you say, contingency days if we need them to bring in. But I think the fact that we're looking at it every single year should hopefully provide a bit of additional comfort to members.
I guess my concern with this particular year is this is going to be like the first full year where we're actually going out and spending quite a bit of money. So probably if you're going to spend extra time, it should be in the first year. So, yeah.
Councillor Benny.
Yeah, I've been on the investment board and, looking at the trading. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, being on the investment board and looking at the paperwork we've had before us in the investment board, I would have said 10 days was more than adequate for that. Section 106 officer knows the amount of work that's going on. There is work that is going on, but in terms of auditing accounts and looking at what we do, there is work that goes on, but I would have thought 10 days to audit that work would be more than enough, really. It doesn't meet on a regular basis. The officers do work and we are preparing things for the investment board, but it isn't like we've got 20,000, 100 properties that we've got to manage and audit where all the incomes and outgoings from that. I would have thought 10 days was more than enough for the audit work on there, but as you say, you've got provision if you need it.
And I think, Councillor Benny, you're right. I mean, we've got reports coming to Cabinet on the investment board activity, and we've got the annual report going to ONS. And I think, as Councillor Booth and as Cathy says, the plan is flexible, and the LATCO will depend on the amount of, there's a materiality of the amount of activity that's going on through the LATCO. But I think that will become apparent as things continue to expand and grow.
I think one point just to clarify on there, the audit work we're doing on the local authority trading company is from the Fenland District Council perspective. So we're not specifically auditing the company itself. That'll be something that will be done by your external auditors. The work we are doing is in terms of the relationship with Fenland District Council.
Councillor Booth.
Thanks, Chair. Well, with all due respect to Councillor Benny, I think he's probably got a conflict here because he's actually on the board. I'm not sure if it needs to be actually declared in this instance, although it's publicly known. But I think caution is required, because if you're actually that closely involved, you probably ought to be careful on what you say about how much time is required on reviews. we are an independent assurance board, Fenland District Council, and I think it's appropriate that we ask tricky questions if need be.
I think, Chair, just for clarification, Councillor Benny is a member of the Investment Board, which is a subcommittee of Cabinet. He is not a director on the board of the LATCO, just to make that point.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hewlett.
Is he in a position to take decisions?
Yes, I am.
Any other comments, questions? members?
Sorry, just to clarify, on FFL, Councillor Benny is not in the position to take, he is, the investment board will sign off the business plan, but operationally, Councillor Benny cannot take decisions on the LATCO, if that's what you were referring to. Yes, absolutely. No, that's run by the board of directors, and Councillor Benny is not on the board of directors. So the investment board provide policy and guidance and sign off the business plan, but he doesn't actually make decisions on the LATCO. He's not a board member of the LATCO.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I recognise the legal position, but I think because of the involvement Councillor Benny has, obviously, potentially there is a conflict there. And I think with the way the structure's been set up, the business plan is effectively the instructions given to the directors for the LATCO. So to say there's no influence would be incorrect. And I think it's about being transparent in these situations. And making sure that we're all above board, people understand the situation. But I think to say there's no influence exerted would be inappropriate, because what's the point of having an investment board that's going to set a business plan? It's basically giving the instructions to the directors to go out and get to do the activity.
Councillor French.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Having listened to Councillor Bliss, I think he's probably wrong, but can we take legal advice on this and bring it back to our next meeting for clarification?
Councillor Hewlett, do you still want to come in?
So I'm happy that it goes off to the monitoring officer or whoever, so that we get absolute clarity on who does what within that. And we're not got two hats on there.
Any other comments, members? No. There are no further speakers, therefore the recommendation is the Audit and Risk Management Committee to acknowledge the internal audit resources and to note the attached internal audit plan for 2022-23. Please raise your hands if you agree to note the report. Thank you, members.
Chair, but also to note the comments of the committee as well regarding.
Yes, to note those comments as well. Thank you, Councillor. Agenda item number 3, the annual governance statement update. Sorry, 6. Did I say 8? Sorry, 6. I now call upon Kathy, Internal Audit Manager, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. So agenda item number 6, the annual governance statement update for 2020-21 is on page 23 of your agenda packs. This update is for the committee to receive following the final annual governance statement that was included within the statement of accounts that were signed off in November 2021. Normally we try to do this at 6 monthly intervals, but with the delays in signing off the accounts and the shift in those timetables, I felt it was important to bring it before the end of the year, before we start work on the 21-22 annual governance statement. So it really is just a brief update included within the annual governance statement that came with the statement of accounts. There was an action plan at the end of it, which had 3 actions. And this report provides an update on those actions. So the first action point was around the council's financial position. So on Appendix A on page 25, you can see that the issues that were raised, the summary of those actions and the update. So both Peter, Mark and the finance team have provided an update on where we are in terms of our financial position. And obviously, I think one of the things you'll all be aware from the recent council meeting and our budget position is there are a number of areas where we are reliant upon central government and other areas for our funding. So the update provides an update on those areas. The second action point was around impacts that may arise as a result of legislative and national policy changes. Again, the issues, the summary of those and the updates. So we continue to monitor any legislative changes. We are still waiting for a comprehensive spending review. There was a spending review considered as part of the council tax and budget setting process. And I think an awful lot of the things that we expected to come in during the last sort of 6 months have been delayed as a result of the pandemic. Certainly areas around refuse, I know there was going to be some legislative changes around refuse, and those we're still waiting for those to come in, but we are continually monitoring them along with members of the cabinet and other officers as well. The third action was in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic and unforeseen challenges in both the council's decision-making machinery, our meeting structures, and financial consequences as a result of that, and continuing to be prepared for mobilisation and our business continuity arrangements around how we deal with large-scale pandemics. Hopefully we won't see any more large-scale pandemics, but obviously the areas that we've raised and identified around business continuity play an important role for any unforeseen circumstance that may arise as a council and delivering our services. So the updates are provided there. I'm happy to take any questions, but obviously we are now coming to a close of 2021-22, and we will begin shortly work on the audit, the annual governance statement for that year. So any comments that you have on this report, we can also feed forwards into next year's annual governance statement as well.
Thank you, Kathy. Can I have a proposer for this report, please? Councillor Mrs. Wrench. Seconder, Councillor Booth, thank you. I open this item for discussion. I believe Councillor Hewlett wants to speak. Can you turn your microphone on?
Sorry. I don't know whether this is relevant to this particular item, but we're all well aware of what's going on in Ukraine and the number of refugees that will be coming to the country. And local authorities will obviously be heavily involved in that sort of thing. Is that something we should be flagging up, or is that we wait for that later? Because we're in a dire situation now, aren't we, with the cost of living and the whole lot is up in the air, to be frank with you.
I think an organisation such as ours, issues such as the ones that you raise, I mean, obviously they will be picked up in as part of our risk register. The Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Local Resilience Forum, they look at all of these sorts of areas as well. And I was at a meeting last week which did discuss this in quite some detail and the areas that we as a council need to be being prepared for moving forwards. Obviously, we don't know what the outcome of any of that's going to be and how that's going to impact us. So at the moment, it's keeping a watching brief. In terms of the annual governance statement, yes, it's something that we will have a look at to see in terms of a watching brief, what we need to be aware of, and if there are is there anything we need to include within our annual governance statement looking forwards, future-proofing our organisation, protecting our citizens. All of those areas do cover off to a certain extent. So it's a really useful point, and I think one that is useful to have minuted as well. But it is something that we are continuing to keep a watching brief on as an organisation.
Thank you, Councillor Booth.
Chair. Yeah, I guess the point I just wanted to raise was in relation to item 1, particularly around the difference in shortfall predictions and the variance that we've got there. I think I'm pretty sure Councillor Bowden would be saying something similar to this, that, you know, to have such a wide variance isn't good practice. And is there anything we can do to try and avoid that? Now, obviously, I realise the whole COVID situation and how that's affected us as a council. But we're still getting sort of wide variations in where we are going to be financially at the end of the year. We're talking 600,000 there roughly, and I think that's something we, as a council, we want to try and avoid experiencing in the future.
I think if you don't mind, I'll hand over to our Chief Finance Officer.
I think that's a really, it's an interesting question, but I think when we, in February 21, when Councillor Bowden brought the full budget, there were so many unknowns, as there still are, and the variances and the differences. There's government funding that's come our way, all sorts of things which we could never envisage. So actually, I think this is a really good performance, and I hope we continue to outperform our budgets going forward. But there are so many unknowns and so many variables, it makes it really, really difficult to set a budget in the first place. I think the only certainty in our budget in the income line is council tax. I think everything else is pretty much up in the air. So there's lots of assumptions, as you'll have seen in the full budget papers. I hope that we always come in better than we put in the budget. But actually, when we do the budget, we do it quite early. It starts to November, December. Lots of things change, and they will change this year as well. I'm certain of that. So I'm happy to see that that's dropped by 600,000. I hope it drops by more between now and the 31st of March.
I recognise that this hasn't been a great year to do predictions. Hopefully, this following year it should be a bit more stable. But I think the point is it's having such wide variances in the budgets, and I'm sure Councillor Bowden said in the past, we ought to try and avoid that wherever possible by having the right controls in, because as a council, how can we manage our finances responsibly if we're going to be 500,000 out potentially, every year? So it's just a point. I guess it's what controls we can have in place that might help that. But as I say, this year's been an exceptional year because of all the circumstances.
I think the challenge I would put back there, Councillor Booth, is I've looked at all our neighbours' budgets and what they set and how they come in. No one comes close, and some of our neighbours are the worst at budgeting because they discount certain things anyway. I think that's a pretty difficult ask, and I would always hope that we come in better than we present. I challenge, I'd look at all the council, all the local districts, and see how close their actual outturns are to what they put in the budget. But we do realise that putting an accurate budget forward does have key decision making, such as council tax, etc., etc. So we try and be as good as we can, but there are lots and lots of variables and things that change from one year to the next, not least government funding and positions on numerous grants and things that they give out as one-offs. It is really difficult. I take the point. I don't know if I can accept the challenge because it's a very, very difficult thing to do. When we put our budgets together, we use the best available information that we have at that point in time.
Councillor Benny.
Yeah. I mean, to look at COVID-19, I mean, we've gone through the worst year that you possibly could have had as a council. We have reserves for national emergencies, dire emergencies, and we haven't had to touch them in real terms. There is a £600,000 difference in there, but I do think that most council budgeting is done in a rather pessimistic way. To give a pessimistic figure instead of maybe what might be perceived by others as a truer reflection of what we expect, because it's always better to say, well, we did better than we did, rather than, oops, we made a small mistake last year and be criticised for it. So that does come into it. But also, I think Councillor Bowden set up the equalisation fund, and that equalisation fund would even wipe out, or nearly wipe out, the 243,000. So, that shows that Councillor Bowden has done a good job balancing the books as the portfolio holder for finance. And if we can come out of this in probably one of the worst situations this country's been in since the Second World War, maybe not in the 70s, but it's certainly one of the worst financial situations we've been in, and health-wise, in my lifetime, I think we've done very well. And I think it shows good management on behalf of the council, on behalf of Peter, and the portfolio holder for finance for getting steering the ship as well as they have done. So I'd say thank you to all of you for that.
Thank you, members. Any other comments or questions? Okay, there are no further speakers. Therefore, the recommendation is the Audit and Risk Management Committee to note the progress made against the actions identified in the annual governance statement for 2021. Please raise your hands if you agree to noting this report. Thank you, members. Agenda item number 7, Risk Management Strategy. I now call upon Stephen Beecher, Head of ICT, Digital and Resilience, to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you've all had opportunity to look at the latest risk management policy and strategy document, which can be found on page 33 of your packs. Since the previous version, we've added 4 new sections. These are the definitions of risk and risk management on page 36, our risk appetite and tolerance levels on page 37, risk analysis and scoring on page 39, and risk control on page 41. And as you'd expect, a number of minor changes to ensure the document's kept up to date and relevant. Moving forward, we'll bring this document before this committee on an annual basis for review, but today, as usual, we'd welcome any questions or comments.
May I propose of this report? Councillor Booth, seconder, please. Councillor Mrs Davis, thank you. Now open this item for discussion. Please raise your hand if you have anything to say. Councillor Booth.
Chair. Yeah, thanks for bringing this for us. You did say bringing it back every year. I'm not sure if it really requires that. I know we've had discussions about other policies, maybe you reviewing them on a triennial basis. I think it's probably more important we look at the what's beneath this with the risk registers and that definitely every quarter or so. But I don't think the policy is going to change dramatically. Having worked in risk management, you know, as you say, there will be tweaks to the policy. So I guess that's one point just to consider. I think one other thing is it would be useful in the future if we could maybe use track changes to highlight what changes are. But the benefit of not having track changes on this document is you have to read it from fresh. So I've looked at it with a fresh pair of eyes. I've got a few sort of minor observations, I guess. 9.3, where you talk about there's 3 options for controlling risk. I think in the risk management arena, there's actually 5. Certainly from my experience, I think you would have, was it risk retention or risk acceptance? Because you know, at times you just accept the risk for what it is and say, well, our controls are suitable. So I think it's important to capture that. And also risk sharing, which I think is pertinent to this council, because we do that in a number of ways through things like ARP, you know, the sort of the planning shared service, although I think that's a bit of a misnomer. But you know, where we're actually sort of working across other organisations, you're actually sharing that risk, and that's the whole purpose of those organisations. I think we probably just need to update that. I think, well, from memory, it used to be like the Association of Risk Managers used to sort of have a standard document. I suspect you've managed to sort of take bits and pieces out of that. There's numerous risk policies around that you can use. So that's those bits. The other bit, I guess, is on, was it page 42, about the roles of various people. And I guess it's a question is, you know, around, you know, who sets the risk appetite and the risk strategy? Because I think in this document it's saying the senior management team, but is it not the members is my challenge? Because, you know, I've always been told or taken the view that it's councillors set the policy and officers do the implementation. So I wonder if it needs to be amended to reflect that, because in theory this is coming for us today. We're kind of agreeing to the risk appetite and everything, and then also you know, we look at things at full council as well. So I think it probably needs some changes around that, around you know, who's actually setting the strategy and the appetite.
Yeah, we can definitely take those points on board. As for the track changes, if you did want a Well, I do have a track change document if you did want to see that.
Read it fresh now, so as I say, there's a benefit to doing that every now and again. But yeah, if there's minor changes in the future, I think definitely.
Yeah, we'll take those on board.
Councillor Booth? Wick, sorry.
Strategy I haven't got a problem with. It is the actual risk register and the management of that and the identifying of emerging risks that should be included in the risk register, along with the mitigations to those risks, and if it can be an ultimate fallback position should the mitigation not work. And that should be part and parcel of the ongoing management of the risk register, because it's that key document that determines our resilience to actually handle the risks that emerge and come towards us.
Yeah, we do review the risks and any oncoming risks on a quarterly basis with the corporate risk management group. Then that's passed through the corporate management team before we bring it to this committee, and to show the mitigation and risk rating. Yeah, but we see this as a separate document, policy and strategy.
And I think, just to clarify, Councillor Wicks, that is what Councillor Booth was saying. The risk register itself comes quarterly here, which has all that information on. I think we did review that at the last meeting, I believe. So yes, I think that does happen, and that's where all the detail sits.
Thank you, Chair. And I think it does set out that sort of approach in this policy document anyway. So, you know, that you're going to do the reviews and who's going to do it. So I think it captures it. This is I guess, the first building block of the risk management process. It's then, you know, what we do effectively, which is our role to sort of, I guess, oversee from an audit committee perspective.
Thank you, members. Any other comments? Therefore, the recommendation is for the Audit and Risk Management Committee to note the annual review of risk management and corporate risk register and agree the latest risk management policy and strategy. Please raise your hands if you agree to pass the latest risk management policy and strategy. Thank you, members.
Chair, taking on board the comments provided.
And take on the comments, yes, thank you. Agenda item number 8 is the Audit and Risk Management Committee work plan. There are no definitive dates, but they will be circulated in due course. But these are sort of a guide of what we're expecting in the next few months. Agenda item number 9, items of topical interest. I believe, Peter, you've got an item.
Thank you, Chair. You'll remember that we had the PSAA audit appointment at the last committee, the paper where we did some training on the appointment of external auditors. The recommendation from here then went to full council in February, and we agreed that we would follow that appointment process. I just wanted to confirm to this committee that I've accepted their invitation to opt in now. So that's the route we're going down for the appointment of external auditors going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Agenda item number 10, items which the chairman
Chair,
has.
sorry, just on page 46, it's got about committee training, and that's got an amber status. We are receiving regular training now. Should that not be a green status?
Yeah, I can amend that.
And,
And if you have any other suggestions for any training, then please forward them to me. And if you'd like me to do that, how we conduct an internal audit, then that's certainly something I can bring to the committee when it's a convenient point.
Yeah. And the other point is about the independent member appointment, which is due in July. I know it's not due, but are we taking any steps to deliver on that?
Yes, we are. Absolutely. There'll be a paper that comes to this committee in July. That's what we're aiming to do, to trigger a discussion and see where we need to go with it. So that will outline the process, and that will be driven by this committee.
Should we be amending the due date? Because if we look at the paper, they won't be in place by July, will they?
I think the due date is when we bring the report here. There will be a process after that.
Thank you, members. Agenda item number 10. Items which chairman has under item 3 deemed urgent. I believe there are none. This marks the end of the meeting. I declare the meeting closed. Thank you, members.